Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the 48 Hour Filmmaker YouTube channel. So today I want to go over with you the 3 biggest mistakes I've made in 48 hour filmmaking. Number 1, it's all about story. The biggest mistakes I've made have had to do with story. The second thing I want to share with you is pre-production, the planning, failing to plan properly. And number 3 has everything to do with post, and in particular editing and getting ready for the editing in a 48-hour film. So number 1, let's talk about story. The biggest mistake I've made in 48-hour filmmaking has everything to do with story. If you took 48 hours and you divided it up into 3, that would be 16 hours. 16 hours for story, 16 hours for production, and 16 hours for post-production. But in reality, story really happens even less than that, because if your 48 hours starts at a 7 p.m. and now you just counted 12 hours, that's 7 a.m. In 12 hours at 7 a.m., you really have about 12 hours max, because come 7 a.m. you've got to start the day all for filming in most cases. So in reality, is coming up with a great story is really in a 4 to 8 hour session. Once the script is being written, that is really, you're now going all down, you're riding downhill. But the development of that story in those first critical 1-2 hours, that's where the biggest mistakes get made. You start, and now you're hunting for a story. You've been given a genre, you've been given a character, a prop, and a line of dialogue, and then you run. And here are the things that I'm doing now that have helped me to come up with great stories. And that has everything to do with location. Finding the location beforehand has been a big help in coming up with a great story, because once you kind of secure 1 or 2 locations, that already begins to inform your story, and that is a key component to your story. So if you have 1, 2, or 3 locations, and I really try to shoot for 1 location, maybe 2, to keep it simple and to keep it fast. The one thing you're going to find out in 48-hour film is that you have to remain flexible, and so location may even shift, like it did for us in the last film. It may shift on the day of filming, of production. But in general, you want to have 1, 2, or 3 locations in your pocket, but that location already begins to form your story before you even know what genre and what direction your story is going to take. The other thing is your cast, and by that I mean when you start to select your cast, you start to build your cast for the 48-hour film. The kind of characters, the range that your actors have, begins to inform the kind of stories that generally you will be able to develop with your location and with your cast. So those 2 things have been very helpful for me now to begin to bring the seeds of a great story together. The second problem I've had is with pre-production, and by that meaning having everything set and ready to go for production on Saturday morning. And for me, generally, production is always started on a Saturday, and so but making sure your batteries are set, your camera gear set, and now even with that, I like to keep gear to a minimum, and really think beforehand, plan and prepare beforehand, and think about the gear. Keep it to a minimum. Again, in a 48-hour film, you really want to be flexible and I would advise using the minimal amount of gear. Try to use as much natural lighting when you can. Obviously, when you have a lighting, use lighting that has battery. I would utilize bicolor lights, LEDs. LEDs are great because they're light, and if you have bicolor, you can change to conform to cool light or warm light and so on. And because they're battery operated, you can take them anywhere, and your location not having electricity at the location, you can solve for that. But the biggest key is being prepared for that Saturday morning of shooting. In most 48-hour films, all the shooting predominantly happens on that Saturday. And for me, in my experience in all the films that I've done, it generally falls in that 8 to, sunrise to sundown on a Saturday, and in particular that 8 to 6 period. So, but preparing for that day is key. The last problem, biggest mistake that I've made in 40-hour filmmaking has everything to do with post-production, in particular editing. And you cannot start editing soon enough. And by that I mean the minute the gun goes off on a Friday, your post-production should already be started. And by that meaning putting your timeline down, putting the bumpers, the required bumpers for 40-hour filmmaking down, and you begin to understand your genre. You start to collect sound effects and music. If you're working with a score, someone who's scoring, the general idea of that starting to happen. But you're beginning to give your musician ideas of the direction, and cards are formatted, everything's set. But you're already organizing your hard drive. And in the case of our last film, the editing was happening in New York. We shot it here in Austin. The editing was happening in New York, and we had to upload it. Making sure you understand the time requirements for files that need to be uploaded and downloaded. Working all that stuff, doing tests beforehand, before that happens, especially if you're going to be handling stuff remotely. But even if you're not remote and you're local, making sure that all those tests have been done beforehand, so that now, and you get your assistant editor or someone who's going to be grabbing the cards as fast as they can to now get them on the hard drive, and to try to create a put some stuff in the preliminary timeline, and that way you're able to get to the edit as soon as possible, because I've never really had enough time to finish the edit in any 48-hour film. You always feel like you need more time. So the more you can try to start that post-production process from the get-go, get some help, that's a big thing. Those have been the biggest mistakes that I've made. It has to do with story, it has to do with preparation and planning and pre-production, and it has everything to do with editing or post-production, in particular that post-production process to get this film edited in the can. So I hope that helps, and good luck with your 48-hour film.
So when we say action, then you put some more on there.
Can I go higher?
Yes. Oh yeah.